Hello everyone, Lucy Heavens here with another episode of CMO Therapy, a podcast that's hopefully going to help you navigate your way through your marketing journey. Because let me tell you, I get it. Being a marketing leader is no walk in the park. In each episode, we dive headfirst into the world of marketing, where uncertainty, tight budgets, and fierce competition are just the beginning of the rollercoaster ride. But guess what? You are not alone in this. Why go solo when you can tap into the powerhouse of insights from some of the most awesome marketing leaders in the game? And look, the title might include the word therapy, but we are not just talking about challenges here. We are tackling them head on. So join us as we deep dive into the nitty-gritty, share war stories, and unlock secret strategies. And get ready for no holds barred conversations, because sometimes I have no filter. So if you are a chief marketing officer, a marketing lead, or just someone looking to up their marketing game, then I am so glad that you are here with us today. And today I am very glad to have with me the very awesome Mel Barfield. Mel, could you please give a little bit of a quick intro?
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me. I am the managing partner and brand voice lead at Copy or Die, which is a copywriting agency. And I'm also an event speaker, and I host the Indie Business Club podcast, which is for freelancers, founders, and independent business owners.
I love this. I don't think I've done a podcast with another podcast host, so I just...
Are you nervous?
Yeah, I'm a bit, actually. It could go one or two ways. It would be like, blah, 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 like... or waiting for each other to ask the questions. And yeah, but anyway. So we chose a title for this podcast of Why Tone of Voice Still Wins, even in the age of AI. And the reason for that is actually we're not just talking about tone of voice here, and not in the can you update the brand guidelines kind of way. I mean, we're properly talking about tone of voice. We had a really great chat, sort of a briefing call before this, because when every competitor says that they are innovative and customer centric and data led, all of those buzzwords, most of the brands just end up sounding exactly the same, right? And for me, tone of voice isn't a kind of a marketing sort of nitpick. It's a leadership choice, a conscious leadership choice that you make. It's how your business shows up. It's how you build trust. It's how you avoid being, just bland and beige all the time. And now we've got AI producing perfectly polished content in literally the press of a button. This is where kind of, I think, tension starts to get real. So how can you scale that output without losing the human judgment and nuance that actually makes your brand believable? That's what I really want to dig in with you today. So
love it. We really vibed on our pre-chat, didn't we, on our briefing call? We're like, yes, just like punching the air, going, yes, with each other.
Exactly. And now it's all going to come out for everyone to hear. I love this. So we all say tone of voice matters. It's something that marketing leaders, like to say, don't we? It's all about our tone of voice. But when you actually zoom out of that, what job does tone of voice actually do for a business?
Well, looking at it from two different angles. Firstly, there's the customer side, the audience side. So when you have a clearly defined and consistently implemented tone of voice, it means that the customer gets a consistent experience. So they get to know, like, and trust, the massively overused but so relevant terms, know, like, and trust, your brand. They get to know what you're about. They get to know how you show up in different places, and it builds that familiarity. I can't say the word. You know which word I mean. I'll try one more time. Familiarity. And it makes your brand. It can make your brand stand out, though we'll come on to why that's not necessarily always the goal of a tone of voice document. And so from the customer side, the language that you use is so important. It can make trust and it can break trust. So I had a situation recently where I had a branded email from someone, and one of the links didn't work. So I just replied with like, oh, just so you know, it's no big deal because I found my way around anyway, but just so you know, this link didn't work. And the reply I had back was the most ChatGPT's corporate drivel that was like, well, thank you so much for alerting us to this inconsistency. It was like something like that. And I just thought that's such a shame because this was quite a fun brand. So I know I'm obviously especially picky about these things because it's my job to be. But I think anyone receiving that might feel a little bit like, oh, but they're so fun on socials. Why are they talking to me like a robot now? So from a customer side, it's massively important. But also internally, from the business point of view, it makes the job easier for marketing teams. It gives parameters so they don't, it's almost like it reduces decision fatigue because they don't have to be stressing over whether something sounds right, because you've got this should be really clear, really usable and practical guidelines on where you should, how you should sound in different places. So it gives a bit of a shortcut in that regard, especially important for the social media team, obviously. But yeah, so it's on both sides, it's massively important to a business, even if it's a small brand or a small business that's kind of founder led. It's still massively important that anyone writing in that for the brand, anyone showing up online for the brand, knows how it should sound, and very importantly, how it shouldn't sound.
Yeah. It's really interesting you said that. And you said at the start there about, like a tone of voice document. And that's the thing for me, like whenever I've sort of heard tone of voice kind of mentioned or talked about, it's normally as part of the sort of the brand guidelines.
Yeah, that makes me sad when it's like two pages, if that.
Exactly. Or even, just a sentence in there, our tone of voice is, fun, chatty, innovative, or exactly.
Friendly,
cringe.
yet professional. Oh, okay, great.
But that's the thing. So at what point do you think that, at what point is it, does the tone of voice stop kind of being, part of the just part of the brand or the, the brand guidelines? When is it actually kind of like a leadership discussion that everybody's kind of bought into and everybody understands?
Well, like with everything these days, a massive factor in whether a brand voice firstly gets created and implemented, but also then longer term gets used, is the investment that the leadership are willing to make. So I've literally an hour before we started recording this, I had a call booked in, and it was meant to be to start a tone of voice project with a brand. I was going via a consultancy, so I was kind of being brought in like at arm's length almost. So I hadn't met the end client yet. And I had a message about 15 minutes before it was due to start to say that the end client had decided to do everything in-house. So the whole project kind of folded. But it's so disheartening, not from a financial point of view, but obviously, would have been nice to get the project and get the money and do the work and be proud of it. But on a broader kind of scale, it's disappointing because we know how valuable it can be having someone from the outside come in and do that sort of work, because it's that whole thing of like, you can't read the label from inside the bottle. Often you need somebody to come in, hear all the things you're saying as a team, review all of the communications that you currently put out there, look back in time at like how your customers are speaking as well. We always get the voice of customer is something that we look at as well, and we need to kind of be able to have that external viewpoint of everything, and the expert viewpoint as well, because the people doing it in-house aren't necessarily, they might have a copywriter in that team, but they're not necessarily trained and like knowledgeable about how a tone of voice document needs to be created to be accurate for a start, but also usable. So another thing that at Copy or Die we often not insist on, but very, 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 very strongly recommend, is that the leadership go for the slightly more expensive option, but way more useful option, where we include the implementation training. It's almost, I'm saying like we don't refuse to do it without that, but we might start refusing to do it without that, because otherwise, as you know, you can end up with this document that just gets put into a digital filing cabinet collecting dust. And then like you might review it every year, but does anyone actually check throughout the year that it's being adhered to? Does it have all of the sections? It might be that a business changes a little bit or it goes into a new market. Have you got a special section on how you speak to the US customers that you have versus the UK customers, or whatever the situation is? So it really should become part of conversations that you have in terms of business development, really, because the goals that you have as a business can be ably assisted by a really robust and bespoke tone of voice guide that everyone knows how to use.
This is so interesting. I love this. I've got so many questions, Mel. Where to start? So, what's kind of going through my head with what you said is it's just so true, because I think going back to what we were saying earlier about tone of voice being kind of shoved in as part of this, sort of brand guidelines. The thing about brand guidelines is when you've got the kind of the corporate visual identity, everybody is looking at it kind of day on day out, right? You're looking at especially the marketing team, you're looking at the website, you're looking at social media, you're looking at all of the assets that you produce, external assets, PowerPoint decks, whatever it might be. Everything's in your face all the time. And but for tone of voice, the only time that it ever really comes up as part of a conversation is normally where you've you've made a joke on LinkedIn, you've done a bit of a funny post, and somebody, well, that's not our tone of voice, is it? Like, that's the only time it ever comes up, doesn't it?
It's often only talked about when it's gone horribly wrong.
Yeah. So I love that you're talking about implementation being so important. I really love that. Can you sort of tell me, like, what does implementation look like then? Like, what are you looking for? How do you guide companies through this?
So this, with any tone of voice work that we do, it is the very frustrating how long's a piece of string kind of answer, because it really does depend, and same with the length of the document and what it actually contains. It's so tailored to that individual brand that it varies. It can be anything from like 10 pages to, I think we had one that was about 45 pages. Wow. Because it needed to cover so many more contexts. I've totally forgotten what your original question was, though. My brain's gone off on a tangent.
No, it's good. Implementation, like
implementation. Yes, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So in the same way that each document can end up being so variable, the degree to which you can have implementation training depends massively on availability of the team, the budget available. That's the biggest one, always is, because ideally what we'd like to do is to do at least a full day of a workshop just for the implementation after everything's been done. So we start with workshops for the development of the voice in the first place. So it might be that you start with a discovery call online for like 2-3 hours, then you have a full day's in-person workshop, then you revisit the guidelines. We try and do it when they're about 80 to 90% done, then have the implementation workshop, because the implementation training part uses so we'll take the elements of the voice, show people what that actually means in practice, like this, and then like set them tasks such as like, how would you turn this paragraph into how would you edit it to make it more of whatever the tonal tenet is. So they might be like, how do you make this much more of a kind of firecracker, exciting voice? And we go through the ways we would do that afterwards as well. So it's very much a hands-on, practical way of getting people, like the implementation training is not us stood there in front of a PowerPoint deck going, and then you do this, and then you do this. We get people working on real life examples of copy. And then ideally, by the end of the training session, we've then got actual examples of copy that we can use in the guide as examples, but also that they then go off and use in real life. I was going to say, you know what I mean by real life. Actually, they can make those examples live if they want to. So one of the examples that we did recently, we had a broadband company, and we asked them to, one of the implementation training exercises was to come up with social media captions. And I believe they actually did then end up putting some of them out there on their socials. So it's very hands-on and practical. It's because of the earlier work that we do, it's very much rooted in business goals. And just to come back to like the investment side of things, one of the things that, because I do talks on this kind of thing, so I've done a little bit of research and found some stats and that kind of thing. And one of the reports that I found was by the Edelman, I don't know if I'm saying that right, it might be Edelman Trust Institute. And they found that the top 3 things that buyers consider are value for money, quality and trust. And your tone of voice isn't necessarily going to be able to make much difference about the value for money, though it can kind of impact people's perception of value, obviously, because it's language does magical things. It can't really impact the quality, but what it can massively impact is the trust. So going back to that know, like, and trust factor. So I think in terms of investing in tone of voice as a project, it's massively valuable from an economical point of view. Even though it's an investment initially to get that work done, I think the long term excuse me, the long term brand building payoff is massively worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's like you said, I mean, I've known a number of companies in the past where most of the companies, to be honest, I'm thinking back now, that I've been in have had that tone of voice or the brand guidelines kind of already established. But it's the implementation of it, it's the living by it, kind of like day by day, and especially over time as well. Everyone gets really excited, first of all, when you've done a bit of a rebrand and you have this new tone of voice and you feel like you've got a new lease of life. But then slowly it just becomes easier, doesn't it, to fall back onto those, words like, sort of being like
solutions.
Yeah, exactly. So
And that's where, I mentioned budget. Like, ideally, in our ideal world, when we've had our 1 day of training, we then have reviews a month later, 3 months, 6 months. Or the best option, of course, is to get us in on retainer, which is what one of our clients has done. And then they'll send us stuff and say, does this sound, do you think? And actually, it's really, I feel like a proud teacher, or a proud mum if your kid comes home with with an A on their homework, and like, oh, that's so cool. And actually, the training, it's worth saying, in terms of like the benefit to the brand, I'm not pitching here at all. This is the feedback we've had, is that they find because we do it in person and so many teams are remote at the moment, having the time set aside to come together and properly talk about your brand and what it means to people as staff members, what they can chip in with the customer view. They find that so valuable even from like a team building point of view. We had one person say, warmed my heart, that it was the best day's training she'd ever done in her entire career. And if she'd done it before going to uni, or if they'd had a module on it, I think the words she used was something like, if they had a module about tone of voice at uni when she'd done her marketing degree, she would have become a copywriter. And I was like, oh. I was like, it's never too late. You can change.
Do you
change
think
career?
That's part of the reason then why you have so many brands that end up sounding the same? Is it really? Do you think it is that it's the kind of the implementation part that's kind of that is the fault?
Not necessarily. I think it is the fault of Innocent and Oatly and people like that, where they are, and Monzo, where people kind of go, oh, I want to sound like them, instead of going, who are we? What do we stand for? Who are our customers? How do we sound at the moment? How do we want to sound? Like, it shouldn't just be a case of picking from a menu of like, I want to sound like them. And I think so many people get excited. It is exciting when brands are willing to sound a little bit different. What we often find is they'll come in saying that, and they'll come out at the other end like with a bit of more of a muted version than we had hoped that they would go for, because there's still that little bit of reluctance and kind of fear of everything going a bit too unprofessional, quote marks. But I think the reason that a lot of people end up sounding the same is because they see brands like Wendy's, Duolingo, Ryanair. They see them having this kind of like edgy persona online, and then they kind of try and replicate it. The one that just baffles me is Calm, the app that's like meant to be about meditation and stuff. They're doing the most like unhinged style, kind of the stereotype of what Gen Z sound like, but actually most Gen Z people don't really sound like that. They've turned into like a bit of a meme account type voice on Threads anyway, where I've been stalking them slightly for examples for when I do tone of voice workshops and stuff. It's so far from what the product benefit is that I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it doesn't warm me to that brand. It makes me go, why are you making jokes about Taylor Swift memes and things and like edgy stuff that isn't, this is not calming anyone. This is not calming anyone down. So I think there's a temptation to kind of try and go viral, and especially, I know I'm just really talking about social media in this instance, but I think brands can get a bit too focused on chasing likes and shares and things instead of properly considering, should we be posting about the Coldplay concert couple? Is it really on brand? And I think tone of voice is part of all of that. It's how are we turning up online? How are we staying true to who we are as a brand, rather than trying to become a little copycat meme account? That sounded really catty. I didn't mean. Sorry, calm social media manager, if you're listening.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have a tiny ask while you sip that overpriced oat latte. If you're liking CMO Therapy, please hit that follow button and leave a quick rating. It takes 5 seconds tops, and it keeps this marketing madness going. Okay, back to the good stuff. There's one thing that's always kind of really bugged me a little bit about sort of tone of voice, especially, I mean, I've always worked on the B2B side, actually. And actually even, I was going to say even worse than that. It's not worse. I work in an area of financial
Almost
services.
spat my coffee out then. Thanks for that.
Sorry. I work in financial services compliance. Which is, I always struggle with kind of tone of voice here, because obviously compliance, in financial services, trust is everything. And then and
you don't want to sound flippant about very serious matters.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about kind of our audience. We can't be posting, kind of Taylor Swift type sort of memes and things like that. But yeah, the thing that's always kind of I've wondered about tone of voice is how far you take it in sounding like it is kind of a person, I suppose. So what I find a little bit creepy actually is some brands, and I can't think of one in particular now off the top of my head, but with some brands where they are commenting on posts and commenting as if it was kind of like a person. And that kind of that.
Do you mean like a mascot, like a mascot type thing, or an actual?
Maybe that's the difference. So the thing actually, I don't know how much you follow Monzo on, you mentioned Monzo, but Monzo on LinkedIn have done something really clever. They've got the Monzo brand, but then they've got Greg from Monzo.
Oh, yeah.
So this is fine, because I picture there is this Greg working in Monzo that's got this kind of social account, and he's kind of, posting and whatever. And I get that, but it's where the brand itself, it's almost like trying a little bit too hard to be to be a person. That kind of creeps me out a little bit. But yeah, I suppose there's a balance, isn't there, between how you have like your own voice and build up your own kind of like identity as a brand versus somebody in the social media department just having a bit of a play.
Well, when it's a founder-led brand that then gets bigger, like there comes a point where, like, to begin with, a startup's going to have, or often does have, the founder's voice. And actually we've worked with brands where they're like, we need to stop it just being about me, we need to make it, and it's like they want to kind of shift the attention to the brand rather than it just being their voice all the time. And it is difficult, and it comes back to looking at what your goals are, what your business goals are, and what your audience relates to. Because if you've got this incredible founder, CEO, whatever, who really gets, I don't know why this example was coming to mind, but the Elon Musk was coming to mind, and I do not mean that he's brilliant, but what I mean is he has a very distinctive voice, and that is an example where, like, his voice and how he speaks online does immense damage to his brand, like on the flip side of this. And if Tesla starts, I'm not on X anymore. RIP Twitter. I love you, Bird app. Always in our hearts. But if the Tesla brand account is just talking like Elon Musk, that brings onto that brand so much of the negative as well as what some people might see as positive. So I think there's definite case for separation between the founder and the brand, But I also think that it can be a strength if the founder is really well known and very liked, and not too controversial, doesn't burn things to the ground for the sake of it. RIP Twitter again. Then it can be a benefit to still have that link, but it's a difficult one. I think again it comes back to looking at what the goal is, what the customers are responding to, and remembering that what your current customers are responding to, that customer base, you might be outgrowing them and need to look beyond the original kind of core customer base. So there's just so many factors to think about, and that's why, again, not pitching, but that's why I would really recommend bringing in people who can give you that unbiased outsider perspective and give you some kind of expert advice about what you need to be doing, and also give you. I'm so sorry. That is my alarm telling me I have children to go and pick up, but I don't, because I'm not doing the school run today. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But yeah, so as I was saying, what was I saying?
I have a follow-on question from what you were just saying though. So you mentioned there about tying it back to the business goals, which I think is a really, really awesome point. But so often, I've had so many discussions about this on podcasts where you're trying to kind of show, ROI from brand investment. So similar thing with tone of voice then, where like the situation that you talked about, I suppose, where budget is kind of maybe suddenly cut, or, how do you tie that back to business goals and ROI, investment in tone of voice, that is?
It's difficult, but it does take, to be completely brutally honest, it does take a bit of a leap of faith and a deeper understanding and trust in the very core principles of marketing, because it isn't easy to show ROI on a piece of tone of voice work. It's not something you can provide instant results with. There are ways that you can. One of our clients is really into A/B testing, so they'll A/B test headlines on social posts and stuff. So there are ways you can do it, but it's about remembering you need to get that snapshot at the start of a project and then see it all the way through to the end, and then have the same people in the same kind of roles willing to give you that same snapshot of data at the end. But we don't, to be honest, we don't have huge amounts of evidence that we can point to and go, look, this company increased their revenue by this much after having tone of voice, because there are so many other factors going on. I'm just gesturing wildly around at the world. There are so many factors, and it's impossible to isolate the impact of just tone of voice. It has to, and also because we'd also be recommending that it's, especially if it's a bit of a package of, not that we do this part, but if it's the brand identity, the visual identity that's being adjusted at the same time, which often happens, will be brought in because there's a change in, or there's a merger. We had one where there were several smaller brands coming together. They've been bought out by the kind of parent company. So it's like, how do we now have this new unified voice going forward? But with that comes so much other stuff. There's loads of visual identity work being done. They're rolling out into different areas. So you can't always reliably isolate the tone of voice work. But you can kind of hear from the people doing the writing and how they feel before and after. And so the feedback that we get is always massively positive. They feel more confident about how they're going to write about the brand. They feel trusted as well to be able to do it. Because sometimes it'll be the case that they've been bringing in external copywriting help beforehand, and now they're properly training up their social media team, or if they might have like one copywriter, and then they recruit more because they've got this tone of voice document that they can use. So I think it's a lot of qualitative rather than quantitative.
I think it's really interesting because I mentioned about like me working in compliance. So the companies that I work for sell software to compliance teams within the banks, and it's helping them to be compliant, to avoid fines. And it's always really hard when you're talking about ROI, because actually what we're doing is we're stopping them from potentially getting a fine. But how do you know when that fine is?
You could have been fined.
Yeah,
this much.
million, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's sort of the same thing. There's always so much negativity around, we've had a couple of horror stories that we've mentioned there where we've seen brands where their tone of voice has gone totally wrong, and it can be really damaging to
Yeah,
reputation.
it's
So
so
it's
jarring.
a little bit like that, isn't it? I think. What you mentioned there as well about that story about having kind of founders of organizations like of startups where the founder, the brand, and the tone of voice has been built very much around that founder. um how does that kind of work in that, how should marketing teams be kind of separating, their, I suppose, marketing sort of like tone of voice from the tone of voice from sort of the founder, or what the company needs? Am I making sense with that question? Should it be
Not
led?
sure.
Should it be totally led by marketing? Is what I mean. Who needs to be involved? How do you find out what the company's, like the business's tone of voice is? So if you, whether you was moving away from the founder-led voice or whether you were merging with another company and you wanted that kind of consistency, because sometimes I find that it's sort of the marketing department that, or the marketing leader that are having to make all the decisions, and then everybody whinges after that the decisions weren't
Yeah.
the right one, right?
Well, we've done various size projects where you can end up with like 50 people on a Zoom call, kind of trying to get everyone's opinions in that situation is nigh on impossible. So what we would kind of advocate for is having, so to give you an example of one we did at the end of last year, we had someone, I'm trying to think of all the job titles that were in the room. We had someone from customer service. So she was the manager. She was the one that was in charge of the call center and all the incoming email feedback and stuff. We had the SEO. I think there were two SEOs. We had the web developer, the designer, and we had the marketing lead. Well, we had several marketing, various hierarchical marketers. So the team leaders. So we had lots of different departments kind of covered. We allowed all of them to chip in with their say, as well as the overall CMO. And it was really interesting to see their different perspectives of how, because they weren't necessarily all writing. So it's important to know, like, you don't have to just include the writers, because as you say, like otherwise other departments can end up feeling a bit like, oh, but what, do you not want to see what we think about this? So don't just focus on the writers, focus on any of the departments that will have regular interaction with the customers and know the brand and are producing elements of the brand. So the designers and the SEO team, because even if their bread and butter job isn't words itself, it's so important to get their perspective on the current and hoped for voice, because it isn't always about just creating this whole brand new voice. It's about finding what's already there and pulling out all the best bits. So yeah, it's not just about the writers, certainly not just about the writers, but it can be a bit tense sometimes. We had it where there's like, you can tell that the copywriter on the team is a little bit put out that someone, so like getting them on side really early is important, and we managed to do that.
It's just like another
pretty quickly,
tool, isn't it, for them, for the copywriters? It's a tool for them to use, the brand,
yeah.
the tone of voice. And onto tools, actually, just we got a couple of minutes left, but I want to get onto AI.
Boo hiss.
How can we bring AI into marketing without stripping out that kind of that really lovely human voice and human judgment and nuance that your tone of voice really relies on?
Well, we are starting to try and very, very reluctantly, I should add, very reluctantly, look into how other brands and other copywriters are using the tone of voice guide alongside AI. So we are very much #human first, team human. We don't use AI for generating any copy ever, but we're realistic. We know that clients do. So we were in a call with, we didn't end up working with them because they'd already actually signed an agency before we met them. We were speaking with a supermarket, UK supermarket, and it was quite depressing in some ways, because they were like, yeah, all of our content is generated with AI at the moment. I was like, okay. and they didn't have the checks and measures in place necessarily to make sure that what was coming out was good. And I think that is a key part of what we're really keen to kind of promote and work on. We're looking at whether to develop a workshop on this in particular, the theme of what does good look like. Because yes, you can chuck in a tone of voice guide into AI and go, produce me 10 social media captions. But without someone who knows what good looks like, what comes out the other end could be absolute dross, but looks like, to somebody who isn't a writer in particular, might look, yeah, that's okay. That says what we needed to say. It kind of sounds on voice. But there are so many nuances. So the example I always use when I'm talking to clients about voice is, say a brand wants to sound humorous. Well, there's a massive difference between Mrs. Brown's Boys and Stuart Lee. If you're looking at like the comedy spectrum, there are so many different nuances to consider. You need to be able to, if you insist on using AI, you need to get even more detailed about what you mean by certain things, because you need to speak to AI like it's incredibly thick and you've got to explain almost like they're a child. Not that a child should know what Stuart Lee's humour is all about, or Mrs. Brown's Boys for that matter. But you need to be able to be ultra specific to an even greater degree than you would with a human when you're talking to AI. So yeah, I think the checks and balances are the important bit. So yeah, it's just I'm just big sigh there, because
it takes time, doesn't it? Like, I think that's
and there's so much dross that gets shipped. It makes me sad, Lucy. Especially when you can kind of spot it sometimes with bigger brands, when you can tell that suddenly they sound sounding a little bit robotic there. And you start suspecting them of using AI. But yeah, it really, as I say, it comes back to knowing what good looks like, and there are lots and lots of ways you can learn about that on the wonder of the internet. Just don't trust that AI knows what good looks like.
I just actually, to go back on what I was saying earlier about the brands like sounding a bit like a person, I kind of take it back, because as you said, the supermarket, I was thinking about the whole Marks and Spencer's Aldi thing that they've got. Lidl? Oh, which one is it? Where they've got,
I can't remember, but we know what you mean. The feud.
Yeah, one of them going on the feud between the caterpillars and and all the little jabs they have. But I love the way that Marks and Spencer's kind of has its sort of character, I suppose, persona, and the way that they talk, and then Aldi, or whichever one that it is, has.
I think it is Aldi,
isn't it? Yeah. Has their kind of persona, but they're basically saying almost like the same things to each other, but they say it in very different ways because of their tone of voice. It's so clever. So
yeah, and if at any point M&S kind of veer off, that's they're one that is really like so solid and tight. I can't remember the exact wording of this, so sorry for butchering it, but somebody shared something online about how like a fridge wasn't working, and it was in M&S, and it was like this jokey kind of, it made some pun or something, and I was like, that's actually not on brand for them to make a pun or a joke in the way that they did. And that's where, like, obviously a store level decision of just writing something out and printing it hasn't matched up to the overall brand voice. And I think I really love nerding out about this kind of thing, so thank you for indulging me, because once you start consciously looking at the way different brands speak, you can see the discrepancies. You can see, and it's frustrating from the outside looking in, like, it would be so easy to, not easy, but I would love to get my hands on some of these brands and kind of whip them into shape a little bit. And whether that's through training or starting from scratch with their tone of voice guide, I'd love it.
I think there's this, like, just not to sort of, I don't want to end on a whinge. Well, this is therapy.
Let's come on.
CMO therapy. But yeah, no, it is that thing of I think sometimes yeah, and marketing teams kind of get, they like doing the projects, right? They like doing the rebrand or the, the new tone of voice, or we're going to do, I don't know, some whatever new next kind of like project is. But actually, it's the living and breathing it every day that is the thing that's the hardest part, and that's for me the exciting bit. To be honest, I love that.
And don't you love it when you see like micro copy and that consideration, or a 404 page on a brand's website? Then you're like, thank you for not just leaving. Unfortunately, this isn't the page you were looking for. Like having a really on brand 404 message, footer message, the reply that I should have got from my email to the brand about their link not working. It's so satisfying when they do it right, but it is so very jarring when it goes wrong.
That's wrong. That's the thing that you need to think about. Almost do like a little bit of a workshop of like what could go wrong, I suppose. But not that sounds really a bit depressing, but I think it probably highlights all of the ROI points. Then, if you want to,
and it comes back to what you said earlier about like people only seem to talk about tone of voice when something goes wrong, and there is a lot of invisible good stuff that needs to happen. So it's not always glamorous and about writing viral tweets and excellent headlines that people take pictures of on the tube. It's the thing that makes or breaks it, as you said, is that daily consistency, and we love to see it when it goes right.
Mel, where can people find you? Tell me about your what's your podcast called again? It's called
Indie Business Club, and you can sign up at indiebusinessclub.substack.com, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there way too much. So, but yes, I'm not the only Mel Barfield, but if you look at Mel Barfield, then I'll be the one that works at Copy or Die.
Fantastic. That's lovely. Thank you so much. This has been so interesting, and and definitely one I want to go back and make some notes on. So I really appreciate it, and I'm sure the audience will too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.